Somewhere high in the Andes, 2.5 miles above sea level, a line of patrol boats rocks gently on the cold water. Here, you will find young sailors standing at attention in crisp white uniforms. They carry rifles and salute a flag bearing an anchor. This is the Bolivian Navy, an active military force of nearly 5,000 personnel and more than 170 vessels. These sailors run their drills on Lake Titicaca, an inland body of water sitting 13,000 feet up in the sky. They study tides, learn naval discipline, and master seamanship. Yet, if you check any map, the nation of Bolivia possesses absolutely 0 miles of ocean coastline. Maintaining an armada hundreds of miles from the nearest saltwater seems impossible to justify. The simplest explanation would be an old bureaucratic error, a military department someone simply forgot to disband. But the government takes this mission seriously. Ask the sailors running these high-altitude drills what their fleet is for, and they will tell you they are training for the day the sea comes back. Bolivians use a specific word for their geographic condition. It translates roughly to being locked in, walled off, or entirely shut away from the outside world. This navy is a direct response to that condition. It is a nation fiercely refusing to let a 140-year-old geographic wound heal, keeping a massive fleet ready for an ocean they cannot reach. For the first decades of its independence, Bolivia had direct access to the Pacific. It controlled a coastal province called the Litoral, encompassing roughly 250 miles of shoreline. The shoreline backed directly into the Atacama, the driest desert on Earth, where some weather stations have never recorded a single drop of rain. For years, it sat untouched. Then, prospectors discovered vast deposits of sodium nitrate, known as saltpeter, hidden beneath the lifeless crust. In the 19th century, nitrate produced fertilizer to feed growing urban populations and gunpowder to fight wars. Backed by British capital, Chilean mining companies flooded across the border to dig up the wealth located on Bolivian soil. By early 1879, the Bolivian government was running short on cash. They decided to implement a microscopic tax on the exported nitrate, just a few cents on every hundredweight. The Chilean companies refused to pay. When Bolivia threatened to seize their assets, Chile responded with force. On February 14th, Chilean troops landed at the port of Antofagasta and took the city, triggering the War of the Pacific. Bolivia and its ally Peru had the numbers on land, but Chile had a true naval fleet. Controlling the sea lanes allowed Chilean forces to land anywhere they pleased. Bolivia lacked warships to stop them, and the coastline fell. The fighting dragged on until 1883. A formal treaty signed in 1904 handed the coast entirely to Chile, locking the Bolivian nation permanently behind a wall of mountains. Today, Bolivia operates as what geographers call a hostage nation. Without its own port, reaching the global market requires navigating the physical infrastructure and political borders of its neighbors. This animated map illustrates the friction of moving goods overland. A shipment from Bolivia must switch from truck to rail, cross an international border, and incur foreign customs fees. These logistical hurdles add a 55% premium to every container compared to neighboring Chile. Adding to the sting of the loss, roughly 80% of all Bolivian exports travel directly through the exact desert region the country once owned. The final destination for these captive supply lines is the Chilean port of Arica. Every ton of tin and shipment of soybeans must pass through the hands of the nation that took the coast. This bar chart measures the macroeconomic damage. The solid bar represents Bolivia's current GDP. The transparent projection shows the economy could be a fifth larger today with sovereign ocean access. This gap represents a compounding loss, erasing 20% of potential wealth year after year. Getting the sea back is a matter of brutal mathematics. The lack of a sovereign port places a suffocating anchor on the country's survival. Recognizing that military force was no longer an option, Bolivia hired lawyers. In 2013, they argued that decades of previous promises meant Chile had a legal obligation to at least sit down and negotiate ocean access. The case crawled through the International Court of Justice in The Hague for 5 years. Bolivians watched, hoping a ruling would force Chile's hand. Then came the verdict in October 2018. By a vote of 12-3, the court ruled decisively against Bolivia. Chile held absolutely zero legal obligation to negotiate. The decision effectively closed the final conventional avenue. With a military campaign impossible and international law exhausted, the border remains permanently shut. Despite the closed door, the Navy continues to operate. Far away from courts, sailors deploy deep into the steaming Amazon rivers. They perform highly practical work in these isolated borders. They board vessels in the dark to intercept smugglers, transport medicine to remote villages, and pull stranded families out of flooded rivers during the wet season. Yet back in the capital, the political focus returns squarely to the Pacific. Protesters gather to demand the return of the littoral, standing side by side with the very sailors who patrol those inland waters. The demand is woven directly into the culture. Every year, on the Day of the Sea, children parade through the streets for a coastline their grandparents never saw. A landlocked nation spending its budget on warships looks absurd on a map, but the Bolivian Navy is a memory in uniform. It is a country rejecting the treaties and the courts, maintaining a standing fleet, and waiting for an ocean that may never arrive.